I found the country very different in that it was much more built up. The roads were bigger. Unfortunately, there was a lot less trees. But one thing I found that was similar was the friendliness of the Vietnamese people, and especially since this time they were not shooting at us.
The scars left by the Vietnam War aren't always visible. Outside Ho Chi Minh City lies a 200-kilometer tunnel network dug by the communist guerrillas. Capable of withstanding the weight of a 60-ton tank or a 100-kilo bomb, these tunnels were an ideal hiding place for hundreds of guerrillas. They lived for months in these dark, cramped quarters directly beneath a US Army base camp and surfaced at night from hidden trap doors to strike against the enemy and then disappear as if into thin air. Symbols of the war can be found in the most unlikely places. One of the unforgettable images of the period was the Buddhist monk who set himself on fire on a street in Saigon. The act of protest was captured on the front pages of newspapers around the world. The war came to an end when Viet Cong tanks crashed through the gates of the residence of the former president of South Vietnam. The French were there before the Americans, and their colonial influence is still very apparent, from the performing arts to cuisine, from architecture to religion. The legacy that has lasted more than 100 years also manifests itself in elegant old-world hotels, as well as palatial villas in residential areas. And this tomb in the forest. Sometimes an occupier, sometimes a benefactor, China, the giant neighbor to the north, has had a much deeper influence on Vietnam than any other country. The father of modern Vietnam, Ho Chi Minh, was able to evict the French with China's help and lay the groundwork for the reunification of North and South. In spite of changing attitudes, his mausoleum in Hanoi remains a national shrine. The same can't be said of the Lenin statue built when Vietnam was a willing proxy of the former Soviet Union. That statue and the power it represents looks increasingly out of place today.
Well, I must begin by saying that we started our restructuring, which is Doi Moi, as early as in 1982. But since we were not that sure of what to do, so we experiment. We, shall I say, by trial and error, we try to find out a way of managing the country. And now we have something which I might call market socialism. It simply means that we blend both the market economy and the planned economy. But before doing that, we have undertaken at least 4 fundamental reforms. The first one is reform in management. The second one is reform in banking. The third one, reform in our external economic relations. And lastly, we had promulgated this investment law for the foreign investors. And in this law, we guarantee against nationalization by the government. Also, we guarantee against unfair competition. The foreign investors can come into any area he cares to do. He can also invest as much as he cares. It simply means 100% foreign capital.
I think that as the newspaper continues, and I'm sure it will, that the central government is committed to the Doi Moi policy that they started in 1986. That has continued, and they've made progress, and they've made radical changes to their constitution to allow things to happen quickly. But that doesn't mean that everything will be smooth or simple, because it's a backward country. It's a country which has fought many wars, and people don't understand what an investment is, a capitalist system is, and in their attempt to take on Doi Moi and renovation, they're still trying to keep the political process separate to the economic one, and I think that's going to be a major problem for them.
Shaped like an elongated letter S, this beautiful land, with a coastline stretching over 3,000 kilometers from north to south, and with a population of 68 million, is one of the poorest in the world. Scenes of pastoral harmony belie the harsh subsistence realities that 85% of the people face every day. Hue, Vietnam's most magnificent city, suffered extensive damage during the Tet Offensive of 1968. The Tai Hoa Palace is noted for its interior decorations in red lacquer and gold inlay. It was among the buildings of the Forbidden Purple City which were relatively unscathed. The emperors who ruled this region spared no effort in aggrandizing their person with elaborate costumes and headdresses. The new and the traditional blend in this ancient land, with a modern dressed Vietnamese woman respectfully burning incense as she worships a female Buddha. On the Perfume River stands a marvel, the Tien Mu Pagoda, a 7-story tower built in the mid-1800s to worship Buddha. Statues of elephants, horses, and of military and civil mandarins grace one courtyard, and then another that leads up to the tomb of Emperor Khai Dinh. On the ceiling of the middle chamber is an image of a dragon painted by artists using their feet. The life-size bronze statue of Khai Dinh made in France rests on a dais on top of the tomb. A hilltop monument marks the end of religious persecution of Roman Catholics during the Chinese occupation. Confucianism, Buddhism, and Taoism are the principal religions of Vietnam. In most Vietnamese families, it's the responsibility of the eldest son to preside over incense offerings to the dead on anniversaries and traditional holidays. Statues of Buddha predominate here, but there are others as well. Vietnam's many rivers are the very essence of livelihood for the people. The Red River Delta is home to 9/10 of the population of northern Vietnam. Together with the Mekong Delta, these river-fed regions produce most of Vietnam's rice supply. The majority of the people in the Mekong Delta are descendants of the Khmer ethnic group. They probably followed the river into the delta. The Mekong River, which has its source in Tibet, is one of the longest in Southeast Asia. The picturesque waterfront towns that huddle on the banks of this great river's tributaries do a bustling, legitimate, as well as black market trade. The opportunities for entertainment are limited. The ubiquitous video cafes have sprung up in villages to meet this need, depicting Hong Kong-made scenes of graphic gore. Is this a case of catharsis or just mindless entertainment? Whatever it is, these action-packed scenes seem to appeal to all ages. Vietnam is a nation of contrasts, between rural and urban, between the ancient and the modern, and between the north and the south. Here, peasants spend a day at the market selling their rice. Subsistence fishermen work the rivers of the inner city, catching their evening meal for their hungry family. On the streets of Ho Chi Minh City, which the natives still call Saigon, the pace of life is much faster. The bicycles give way to motorcycles and more privately owned cars that you'd rarely see in the center of Hanoi.